"You're too old to run the company." Those were my son's exact words. Calm, smug, like he hadn't just ripped my heart out. I only found out because the accountant texted me, "Congrats on the sale. Didn't realize you'd finalized it already." Sale? What sale? I didn't sign a damn thing. I drove to the office in a panic, still hoping it was some misunderstanding. But as soon as I stepped out of the elevator, I saw them. Mark, my son, sitting at the head of the boardroom table. He was laughing, surrounded by lawyers and two strangers in sleek suits. Champagne glasses clinked. Papers were being passed around. And then I heard him say it, clear as day. "She doesn't know yet, but she's too old to run this place. It's time." It felt like a slap. I froze in the hallway, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My own son, had sold the business I built from nothing. The company I'd poured 32 years of my life into. The business his father and I sacrificed our marriage, our youth, our health for. And I wasn't even invited to the meeting. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or throw up, but I did neither. I turned and walked away before they noticed me. Each step down that hallway felt heavier than the last, my heels echoing in a building that suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock the door. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't see a CEO or a mother. I saw a woman who'd just been discarded like garbage. And that's when it hit me. Mark didn't just take my company, he took everything I thought I meant to him. But if he thinks I'm too old to fight back, he's about to learn just how wrong he is. The next morning, I woke up determined to take back control. I barely slept, tossing and turning all night, replaying Mark's words over and over. "You're too old to run this place." Too old? I practically built that company with my bare hands. I wasn't about to let my own son shove me into the corner like a dusty old trophy. By 8 a.m., I was standing in the lobby of Hartwell Industries, my company, clutching my purse like it was armor. The receptionist gave me an awkward smile but didn't say good morning. Strange. I brushed it off and headed for the elevator. But when I swiped my key card, the light turned red. Access denied. I tried again. Access denied. A knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Before I could ask the receptionist what was going on, 2 uniformed security guards stepped out from around the corner. "Mrs. Hartwell," one of them said, his voice stiff, rehearsed, "we've been instructed to escort you off the premises." It felt like the entire lobby froze. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "This is my building. I'm the CEO." The second guard avoided my eyes. "Your son has updated the company's leadership and revoked your access. We've been asked to ensure you leave peacefully." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You've got to be kidding me. I'm going to my office. Move." But they didn't move. And that's when I noticed the faces. Employees I'd hired, mentored, fought for over the years. They were all staring. Some of them ducked their heads quickly, pretending not to see. Others looked at me with pity. Not one person stepped forward. Not one. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be," the first guard said softly. My eyes burned, but I refused to let a single tear fall. "Fine," I said, my voice like ice. "But let Mark know this isn't over. Not by a long shot." I turned on my heel and marched out, my heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. As the glass door slid shut behind me, I caught my reflection. The gold nameplate that used to sit on my office door, Colleen Hartwell, founder and CEO, was gone. Replaced. In the car, my hands were shaking. 32 years. 32 years of building something from nothing, and now my son had tossed me out like I was nothing. But as the anger roared through me, something colder settled in too. Mark thinks he's won. He thinks he's clever, but he has no idea what I still control. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat in the parking garage for what felt like hours, staring at the steering wheel as if it might tell me what to do. I kept seeing their faces, my employees, the ones I'd mentored for decades, averting their eyes while I was escorted out like a trespasser. I deserved answers. No, I deserved respect. I gripped my phone and called Mark. He didn't answer, so I drove to his condo. The concierge recognized me, of course. She didn't even try to stop me as I marched through the lobby and into the elevator. My hand was trembling as I hit the button for the penthouse. Don't let him see you crack, I told myself. Not yet. When the doors opened, I spotted him through the floor-to-ceiling windows, standing on the balcony with a glass of scotch in hand. He turned lazily as I stepped inside. "Mom!" His tone was calm, almost amused. I was wondering when you'd show up. "How dare you?" I hissed, my voice shaking. "How dare you sell the company behind my back and throw me out like garbage?" He set his glass down with exaggerated care. "I didn't throw you out. I transitioned you into retirement. It was time." "Time?" I took a step closer. "You didn't even tell me. You blindsided me." Mark shrugged. "It had to be done this way. You'd never have agreed otherwise. You're too attached, too emotional." My mouth went dry. "That company is my life's work, and you are too old to run it anymore." The words cut like a blade, sharper than they had yesterday. "You've been holding us back, Mom. I couldn't modernize the business with you in the way. This is what Dad would have wanted." I froze. "Dad? Don't you dare," I whispered. "Don't you dare bring your father into this." Mark smirked. "He built that company to leave a legacy. I'm just protecting it, and my inheritance." There it was, the truth. Not about legacy, not about modernization, not about family. It was greed, pure and simple. I wanted to scream, to slap that smug look off his face. But I didn't. I forced my shoulders back, forced my voice steady. "Do you really think you've won, Mark?" He gave a little laugh. "It's done, Mother. You should be thanking me. I saved you from working yourself into the grave." My nails dug into my palms so hard I felt the skin break. "You're going to regret this," I said quietly. Mark didn't flinch. He just picked up his glass again and walked to the balcony. I turned and walked out without another word. In the car, my hands were cold, but my mind was racing. He thinks I'm powerless. He thinks I'm finished. But there's one thing he doesn't know: the liquid assets, the investments, the portfolio his father left entirely in my name. Mark may have stolen the company, but I still control more wealth than he's ever imagined, and I just might use it to destroy everything he's building. I didn't cry on the drive home, not because I wasn't hurt, God knows I was, but because something colder had taken root inside me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my jaw ached from clenching it so tight. I sat in the car, staring at the dark windows of the house. The place felt like a mausoleum, every corner still echoing my husband's voice. Harold had been gone for 8 years, and yet I swear I could hear him in my head right then. "You always were the tough one, Colleen. Don't let anyone take that from you." I carried those words up the steps and into the house, setting my bag down with a thud. The silence pressed in on me. The living room looked like a museum to another life. Wedding photos, plaques from charity boards, a framed article about Hartwell Industries from the year Mark graduated high school. Mark. I clenched my fists, fury burning hotter with every breath. He thought I was finished, thought he'd cut me off at the knees. But I wasn't powerless. Not yet. I went straight to my study. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. In the corner sat the gunmetal safe Harold insisted on buying back when we started the company. "Keep the important things close, Colleen, and never let anyone know where they are." My hands trembled as I turned the combination. The lock clicked open. Inside, neat stacks of folders waited for me, labeled in Harold's precise handwriting. Trust accounts, Colleen, investment portfolio, private, liquid assets. I pulled the first one out and flipped it open. It took my breath away. Accounts I'd nearly forgotten. Accounts Harold had set up years before his death, all in my name. Millions, spread across international banks, diversified into real estate, stocks, private investments. He'd never said why he'd structured it that way. At the time, I thought it was just Harold being cautious. Now I understood. He'd seen something in Mark before I did. "Money changes people, Colleen," Don't ever assume family makes you safe. Mark hadn't just stolen the business. He'd done it thinking it was the crown jewel. He had no idea the real wealth wasn't tied to Hartwell Industries at all, and I intended to keep it that way. I closed the safe, my fingers tightening around the handle as a plan began to form in my mind. Mark thought he'd won, but he had no idea what kind of fight he'd just picked. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd show him what dirty really looked like. The first step was clear. I needed to call Harold's old lawyer, Margaret Chen. She was the only one Harold had ever trusted. And if Mark had forged anything to make this sale happen, she would find it. My phone was already in my hand when I heard it. A car pulling up outside. Headlights swept across the curtains. I froze, every muscle tensing. Then came the sound of a car door slamming shut. Footsteps on the walkway. I stepped quietly into the hallway, my heart pounding, and peered out the window. Mark was standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, staring at the door. A chill ran down my spine. I stood perfectly still in the hallway, watching Mark through the curtains. He didn't knock. He just stood there, with his hands in his pockets, rocking back slightly on his heels, like he was debating whether to come in or turn around. For a brief moment, I let myself imagine what Harold would have done if he were alive. He'd have thrown that door open and told Mark to go to hell for what he'd done. But Harold wasn't here anymore. It was just me. And as much as I wanted to rip that door open and scream in my son's face, something stopped me. Because seeing him standing there, smug, confident, certain he had all the power, reminded me of another day. The day I buried Harold. It had been cold for April. A sharp wind cut through the churchyard as I stood at the graveside clutching the folded flag they'd handed me. My hands were numb, but not from the chill. Mark had been the perfect picture of grief that day. Dark, tailored suit, tie knotted just right. He held Lauren's hand tightly, his jaw set, his eyes glassy. Everyone kept saying how strong he was being for me. But all I could see was how quickly he'd stepped into Harold's shoes. When the minister opened the floor for anyone wishing to speak, Mark didn't hesitate. He strode up to the microphone with a kind of determination that made my stomach turn. "My father was a builder," he began, his voice catching just enough to sound sincere. "He built a business, a family, a legacy, and it's up to us to carry it forward. Us." But the way he said it, it didn't feel like us. It felt like him. Mark spoke for nearly 10 minutes about the future, about growth, about how Harold's vision wouldn't die with him. People nodded and murmured approval. I stood there frozen, clutching that flag, barely hearing the rest. Because deep down, something sharp and ugly had begun to form in my chest. I'd chalked it up to grief at the time, to exhaustion, to paranoia. But maybe I'd known even then. Maybe I'd seen this coming all along. A sharp knock snapped me back to the present. Tap, tap, tap. "Mom?" Mark's voice was muffled through the door. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I didn't move. "Look, I get that you're upset. I understand. But this is for the best. For both of us. For both of us." The same patronizing tone he used at Harold's funeral when he spoke about carrying the torch. Like he already believed it was his. "Just open the door, Mom. Let's be reasonable about this." Reasonable. That word made my blood boil. I stepped back from the window, forcing myself to breathe. Not yet. Not tonight. I wasn't ready to face him. Not until I had every advantage lined up. Mark's shadow shifted across the curtains. Then his footsteps retreated down the steps. A moment later, I heard his car start. The headlights swept across the front yard, and then he was gone. The house was silent again. But I wasn't. I marched back to my study and pulled out Margaret Chen's business card from the folder in the safe. My fingers hovered over my phone for a moment before I hit call. She picked up on the second ring. "Colleen?" "Margaret, I need to see you, tomorrow morning." Her voice sharpened instantly. "This about Mark?" "Yes, and I think he's already done something illegal." By the time I hung up, my hands weren't trembling anymore. If Mark wanted a war, he was going to get one. Margaret Chen's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound law journals. Same brass lamp casting a warm glow over her desk. But this time, I wasn't here as a client planning for the future. I was here as a mother cleaning up her son's betrayal. Margaret looked up from the folder she'd been reading. Her expression was calm, but her fingers drummed a slow rhythm against the desk. "Colleen," she said softly, "I've reviewed everything, and I won't sugarcoat it." I braced myself. The sale went through because of a power of attorney document, signed and notarized, giving Mark full authority to act on your behalf. My stomach turned to ice. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I never signed anything like that." Margaret's eyes darkened. "That's what I thought. But the signature matches yours almost perfectly." "Almost? Almost?" She slid a photocopy across the desk. "I've seen your signature hundreds of times over the years, Colleen. This one, it's close, but not perfect." I stared at the looping letters, bile rising in my throat. My own son had forged my name. "He's smarter than I gave him credit for," Margaret said grimly. "He filed it with the business registrar 2 weeks ago. That's how he got the sale approved without you." The room seemed to tilt for a moment. I gripped the edge of the chair to steady myself. "And the worst part?" Margaret continued. "Technically, the sale is legal unless we can prove fraud." I looked up sharply. "So he's going to get away with this?" Margaret shook her head. "Not if we move fast. I've already drafted a revocation of the power of attorney and a fraud complaint. Once you sign these, we can start freezing the proceeds of the sale before Mark gets his hands on the money." I nodded, my jaw tight. "What happens if we're too late?" Margaret leaned forward. "Then he'll liquidate the assets and move the funds into accounts we can't trace. And Colleen," her voice softened, "if he's gone this far already, I guarantee he's planning something bigger." My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. The words on the revocation document blurred slightly as tears stung my eyes. This wasn't just about a company. It was about Harold's legacy, about 32 years of sacrifice, about raising a son who now saw me as an obstacle, not a parent. "You're too old to run it." I pressed the pen hard against the paper, nearly tearing it as I signed my name. Margaret gathered the papers briskly. "I'll file this today and get an injunction started. But Colleen—" "What?" "You need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. He's not going to back down without a fight." I looked her dead in the eye. "Neither am I." When I left the office, the spring air felt colder than it should have. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it was time to become someone Mark had never met before. By the time I pulled into my driveway, a text was waiting for me. "Mom, we need to talk. It's time for you to downsize." My chest tightened as I read the words. I looked up at my house, my home for 40 years, and felt a chill run through me. Mark wasn't just coming for the company. He was coming for everything. When I turned the key in the front door, it didn't fit. I jiggled it harder, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Click. Nothing. I pulled out my phone and reread the text Mark had sent just an hour earlier. "Mom, we need to talk. It's time for you to downsize." I thought it was a joke, a cruel, thoughtless joke. But staring at the deadbolt now, reality hit me like a freight train. The locks had been changed. My locks. My house. The place Harold and I bought when Mark was 6. The place where we built his childhood, Christmas by Christmas, birthday by birthday. Gone. I pounded on the door with my fist. "Mark," I shouted, "open the door right now!" No answer. I stepped back and looked up at the dark windows. The curtains were drawn tight. Something inside me cracked. I pulled out my phone and dialed him. It rang twice before his voice came on. Calm, measured, cold. "Mom, you can't keep living there. It's too much house for you now. We've already packed your essentials and left them on the porch." "My essentials?" My voice shook with fury. "Mark, this is my home." "Not anymore," he said quietly. "It's for your own good." I felt the ground sway beneath me. You threw me out?" There was a pause. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. You've had a good run, but it's time to let go." And then he hung up. Just like that, my knees buckled, and I stumbled to the porch steps. 2 cardboard boxes sat there. One had my clothes stuffed in haphazardly, silk blouses wrinkled, shoes mismatched. The other held photo frames and a single mug with a chip on the rim. On top was a handwritten note in Mark's blocky script. "We'll help you find a smaller place soon. Take care of yourself. No love, no mom, just cold efficiency." I sank onto the top step and clutched my keys in my fists so tightly the metal bit into my skin. The sob caught in my throat before I could swallow it back. For the first time since Harold's funeral, I cried. Not soft, polite tears. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that racked my entire body as I rocked back and forth on the porch of the house I no longer owned. My son had erased me from my life. It was nearly midnight before I pulled myself together enough to get in the car. I didn't know where to go. I just drove. Streetlights blurred past as I gripped the steering wheel, my cheeks stiff with dried tears. But somewhere between the third and fourth red light, a thought cut through the fog in my head. If Mark wanted me weak, he's about to be disappointed. By the time I pulled into a cheap motel parking lot, I had already decided my next move. I'd set up a new life, quietly. A place he couldn't find, and from there I would make sure he never touched another thing of mine again. The apartment was small, smaller than any place I'd lived since college. 2 rooms, peeling paint, a leaky faucet that dripped in the silence like a ticking clock. But it was mine, at least for now. I signed the lease under a false name, Elaine Parker, using the ID Margaret's connections had helped me secure in a single day. "We'll keep this quiet," she'd said. "The last thing you need is Mark tracking you down before you're ready." I didn't argue. After what he'd done, selling the company, locking me out of my own house, I didn't trust anyone, not even myself. On my first night in the apartment, I sat on the edge of the thin mattress staring at the blank walls. It felt like being erased. No wedding photos. No Harold's book stacked in the corner. No smell of cinnamon from the kitchen, just a stranger's space. And me, a woman Mark probably assumed was curled up in a motel somewhere, broken and defeated. But he didn't know the truth. He didn't know about the accounts Harold left in my name. He didn't know I still had control of more wealth than he could ever dream of. And he didn't know what I was planning. By the end of the week, I had moved the first set of funds. Late at night, with the glow of my laptop illuminating the cracked plaster ceiling, I transferred millions into new accounts under shell corporations. Mark would never find them. And even if he did, he wouldn't recognize the trail. I was done being predictable. But the loneliness hit harder than I expected. Each morning I brewed coffee in the dented little percolator the landlord left behind and stared out the window at a narrow alley. No birds. No neighbors waving from their porches. Just dumpsters and a stray cat that disappeared whenever I moved too fast. I missed my house. The tulips Harold planted out front. The sound of Mark's footsteps when he was a boy, running down the stairs shouting for pancakes. I had raised him to be kind, to be better. Where had I gone wrong? The question sat heavy in my chest, heavier than all the money in those secret accounts. One night, unable to sleep, I dug out the old leather-bound journal Harold had given me on our 20th anniversary. I flipped through page after page of his neat handwriting until I landed on a line I'd forgotten. "If something ever happens to me, Colleen, you'll have everything you need to stand on your own." I traced the words with my finger, my throat tightening. "I'm standing now, Harold," I whispered into the dark. "I just wish you were here to see it." By morning, the grief had hardened into something sharper. Resolve. Mark had taken my company, my home, my sense of safety, but he hadn't taken my mind, or my fight. I opened my laptop and began typing an email. Subject, urgent. Forensic accountant request. If Mark thought he'd covered his tracks, he was about to learn how wrong he was. After I emailed the forensic accountant, I couldn't sit still. The apartment was silent except for the faint drip of the kitchen faucet. So I pulled Harold's files out of the safe and spread them across the floor like a shield. The lamp cast a pale glow over documents I hadn't touched in years. Account statements, trust agreements, offshore investments in countries Mark didn't even know existed. I traced Harold's handwriting with my finger, steadying my breath. "If something ever happens to me, Colleen, You'll have everything you need to stand on your own. I wasn't standing yet, but I would be. By 2 a.m., I had already moved a portion of the funds. Each transfer felt like placing another brick in a wall Mark would never climb. Millions vanished into corporate shells with names so bland they'd never draw suspicion. Pinnacle Holdings, Westlake International, Arbor Lane Enterprises. Mark thought I was finished. That was his first mistake. Still, I needed more than hidden money. I needed information. I needed to know how far he'd gone and how far he was planning to go. The forensic accountant, Teresa Walsh, responded to my email the next morning. Send me everything you have. If there are cracks in his transactions, I'll find them. Her tone was brisk, professional, reassuring. Next, I called Harold's old contact, a private investigator named Griffin. Discretion is non-negotiable, I said. You'll get it, he promised. His first assignment, track every move Mark had made in the past 6 months. Every meeting, every document, every dollar. Once I hung up, the tension in my shoulders loosened slightly. I still didn't know what Mark was planning, but whatever it was, I'd find out. And when I did, I'd be ready. The email came at 3:42 p.m. Subject, urgent, preliminary findings. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Colleen, I've attached a summary of our initial findings. Please review and call me directly before taking any action. Teresa Walsh. The PDF opened with a neat header and bullet points, but my eyes locked instantly on the first line. Your son has leveraged the company assets to secure private loans totaling $18.4 million. I froze. The room felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in. I read on. Funds had been funneled into a shell company, Orion Ventures, under Mark Hartwell's sole ownership. Documents indicate plans to liquidate existing Hartwell Industries properties and patents. Liquidate, not preserve, not expand, liquidate. Harold's legacy, my life's work, gone. The phone rang, startling me. It was Teresa. Colleen, we need to talk, she said without preamble. Your son isn't just mismanaging assets. He's dismantling the company from the inside out. Her voice was calm, but firm. He's preparing to flip it for a quick cash out and invest in high-risk ventures, tech startups, crypto, private equity. If those moves fail, and there's a good chance they will, Hartwell Industries will be bankrupt within a year. I pressed a hand to my mouth. All those years, the late nights, the deals I fought for, the employees who became like family. And Mark was gambling it away like chips on a poker table. Teresa's tone softened. Colleen, he doesn't care about the company. He's not trying to preserve it. This is about building his own empire, and he's using your name to do it. My throat tightened, but no tears came this time. There weren't any left. Thank you, Teresa, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was quieter, flatter. I'll handle it from here. When I hung up, I didn't move for a long time. The apartment was silent except for the steady tick of the second-hand clock on the wall. I should have felt shattered, but instead, something colder settled over me. He thinks I'm weak because I stayed quiet. He thinks I'm too old to fight back. I reached for my phone and called Margaret Chen. It's time, I said simply. Time for what? For us to take everything back. Margaret didn't waste a second. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting across from her in her office, a stack of legal documents between us. You're absolutely sure you're ready for this? She asked. I wasn't ready for any of it, I said coldly. That didn't stop Mark. She slid a form toward me. Petition for injunction. This will freeze the proceeds from the sale. He won't be able to touch a cent until we're done in court. And the lawsuit? I asked. Already drafted. Margaret tapped a thick folder. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Forgery of power of attorney. If the judge sees what we've collected, he'll grant us an emergency stay. My hand didn't tremble as I signed. Not this time. Each stroke of my pen felt like a blade slicing through every humiliation Mark had piled on me. The boardroom meeting I wasn't invited to. The security guards escorting me out of my own company. The locks on my house changed without a word. By noon, Margaret was on the courthouse steps, filing the motion herself. It's in the judge's hands now, she said when she called. We should know within 48 hours. The waiting was agony. I spent those 2 days pacing my tiny apartment, drinking too much coffee, barely sleeping. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart lurched. But it wasn't Margaret. It was Mark. Mark, Mom, I really think you'll be proud of me when you see how I've positioned the company. Let's meet soon. Proud? I stared at the message, my lip curling. He didn't even know yet. He thought he'd won. The call came on the second morning. Margaret's voice was steady, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath it. The judge granted the injunction. I exhaled slowly. The proceeds are frozen? Every cent. And the lawsuit? Filed. Mark will be served within the week. I stood at the window of my apartment, staring out at the cracked alley below. Mark didn't know yet. I wanted it that way. Let him sip his scotch and gloat over his victory. Let him feel untouchable for a few more days. And then I'd take it all back. The restaurant was Mark's choice. Of course. A sleek, modern place with dim lights and leather booths. The kind of spot people went to close deals and pretend they weren't circling each other like predators. I'd arrived 10 minutes early. He came in 20 minutes late. Mother, he said with a practiced smile, sliding into the booth across from me. Sorry to keep you waiting. Things have been hectic. Hectic. That's what he called, gutting my company and locking me out of my own house. I'm sure, I said softly, folding my hands on the table. He waved the waiter off without looking at the menu. Let's skip the small talk. I know you're upset about how everything's gone down. Upset. He said it like I'd lost my favorite scarf, not my life's work. You've been running Hartwell Industries for decades, Mom. Mark continued, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. You're a legend. But it's a different world now, faster, more aggressive. I had to make hard calls to protect the future. The future? I asked. Yes, our future. The business was stagnating under your methods. I couldn't let Dad's legacy crumble because you wouldn't let go. I tilted my head slightly. So you forged my name on a power of attorney to save me? Mark stiffened for a fraction of a second before recovering. Desperate times, he said with a shrug. You wouldn't have listened otherwise, and you'll thank me later when you see how I've positioned the company. I let out a soft laugh. That seemed to annoy him. What's funny? You, I said simply. You really think you're in control. His jaw tightened. I am in control, Mother. I saved you from working yourself into the grave. You should be thanking me. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes darted to his phone on the table every few seconds. He was waiting for a message. A deal. A wire transfer. He doesn't know yet, I thought. He didn't know the injunction was filed, didn't know the lawsuit was moving forward, didn't know his precious proceeds were frozen solid. I don't need saving, Mark, I said quietly. Not from you, not from anyone. He smirked. Then why agree to meet? You're not here to fight. You're here because you know I'm right. I smiled, a calm, measured thing. Enjoy the wine, I said, sliding out of the booth. You'll need it. His brows furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. As I walked out of the restaurant, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Margaret. It's done. He'll find out within 24 hours. The first cracks came on a Thursday morning. I was sitting in the small kitchen of my apartment, stirring sugar into my coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was Margaret. He knows, she said simply. Across town, Mark was screaming at a banker. We'd learn later that the call started politely enough. He'd logged into the company's account and found a big, red notice across the top. Funds frozen pending litigation. At first, he thought it was a technical glitch. Then the banker explained, flat, professional, unbothered, that a court order had locked down the proceeds from the Hartwell Industries sale. Mark lost it. Witnesses said they could hear him shouting through the glass walls of his office. That same afternoon, he stormed into his lawyer's office downtown, demanding answers. Fix this, he screamed, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk, but there was nothing to fix. The injunction was airtight. Meanwhile, I was miles away, calm as still water, signing a very different set of papers. A proxy buyer, a longtime client of Margaret's, was purchasing Hartwell Industries on my behalf. When the deal closed, the company would return to my hands, quietly, legally. Mark wouldn't even see it coming until it was too late. The next morning, I sat in the back seat of a town car parked outside Hartwell's headquarters. Through the tinted windows, I watched employees filter in, carrying their coffees and laptops. This building had once been my second home. Mark had tried to strip it from me. Now it was mine again. I didn't go inside, not yet. Instead, I watched as my proxy held a press conference in the lobby, announcing the company's new ownership. There were gasps and murmurs when the staff learned who had bought the business back. By the time my name was revealed, the room erupted in applause. "They're cheering," Margaret said over the phone, her voice thick with emotion. "They should be," I replied. Across town, Mark was pacing his penthouse, phone pressed tight to his ear. His voice, once smooth and confident, was ragged now. "No," he barked into the phone. "This isn't possible. She doesn't have the resources." But I did, and I'd used them with surgical precision. The final blow came later that afternoon. Mark tried to transfer funds from his personal accounts to cover a margin call. Denied. The bank had frozen his assets pending investigation. Margaret texted me just before dinner. "He's unraveling. Expect a visit soon." I smiled as I set my phone down. Let him come. The knock came just after midnight. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, staring at the glow of the city lights through the window. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I stood slowly, setting the mug down. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I knew who it was. When I opened the door, Mark was standing there. His suit jacket was wrinkled, hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. His tie hung loose around his neck. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I didn't move. "Do we?" I asked softly. He flinched at my tone. He raked a hand through his hair. "I made a mistake. I didn't think it would go this far." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think what would go this far, Mark? The part where you forged my name? Or the part where you tried to erase me from my own life?" His face crumpled slightly. "Kayla pushed for it. She said you were tired, that it was time for us to take over. I thought she was right. You thought she was right. I didn't want conflict. I thought you'd fight me, and He trailed off, his shoulders sagging. "I didn't think you'd push back." There it was, the truth. It hadn't been malice, not entirely. It was cowardice. "Mom, please," he whispered. "We can fix this. Together. Just call off the lawyers. Let's sit down and figure it out like a family." "A family," I echoed. My eyes swept over him. The son I raised. The boy I used to make pancakes for on Sunday mornings. The man who had betrayed me without a second thought. I stepped aside, letting him into the apartment. Not to forgive him, but to let him see how far I'd already moved on. Mark hovered near the kitchen counter, staring at the sparse furnishings. "This place, it's so small," he murmured. "It's mine," I said simply. He turned to me then, his eyes glassy. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. I was trying to build something bigger for both of us." I met his gaze evenly. "No, Mark, you are trying to build something bigger for yourself. Don't lie to me. Not anymore." He dropped his head into his hands. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. I watched him for a long moment. For the first time in weeks, I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, no love. Just a cold, quiet clarity. "You've already done it," I said softly. "Now you get to live with it." Later in my company. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. For a moment, I stood there in the lobby of Hartwell Industries, taking in the familiar sights. The same polished marble floors, the same glass walls catching the morning sun, but the energy was different. Heads turned as I stepped out. The receptionist froze mid-sentence. The security guard straightened, his eyes flicking nervously between me and the elevator. I didn't break stride. This was still my company. By the time I reached the boardroom, I could hear voices inside, Mark's voice among them, smooth and commanding, just as it had been the day he blindsided me. I pushed open the door without knocking. The room fell silent. "Mother," Mark said, rising to his feet. His confident mask slipped for a fraction of a second. "I wasn't expecting you." No, I said coolly, stepping inside. You weren't. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as I walked to the head of the table, the seat he had taken from me. You've all been kept in the dark, I said, my voice calm, steady. But that ends today. I set a thick folder on the table with a sharp snap. In this file are the details of a fraud perpetrated against me and this company. A few directors leaned forward, eyes widening as they scanned the documents. Mark Hartwell, I continued, my gaze locking on my son, forged my signature on a power of attorney to sell this company out from under me. He leveraged its assets recklessly, putting every employee and every client at risk, all to fund his personal empire. Gasps rippled around the room. Mark's face flushed deep red. This is ridiculous, he snapped. She's bitter. She doesn't understand the world has changed. No, Mark, I said quietly. You don't understand. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and staying still doesn't mean stupid. I straightened, my voice sharpening. I built this company from nothing. I gave you every opportunity to lead with integrity, and you spat on it. I pulled another document from my bag and laid it on the table. Effective immediately, Mark Hartwell is removed from his position as acting CEO. The room erupted in whispers. Mark's mouth fell open. You can't do this. Oh, I can. I fixed him with a cold stare. The board has already signed off. You're done. Mother, please. Security, I called, cutting him off. 2 guards stepped into the room. Escort Mr. Hartwell from the premises. Mark's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood, his hands balled into fists. You'll regret this, he hissed. I didn't flinch. No, Mark, you will. As the guards let him out, the boardroom sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, the directors began to clap. It started as a hesitant ripple, but by the time I sat down in the chair at the head of the table, my chair, the applause filled the room. The applause still echoed as I stepped into my office. Once again. The gold letters on the door gleamed. Colleen Hartwell, CEO. Someone had already polished the nameplate. I ran my fingers over it gently, feeling the weight of every sacrifice it had taken to earn this moment. When I entered, the staff burst into cheers. People I had hired, mentored, fought for. Their faces lit up as they crowded around the doorway. Welcome back, Mrs. Hartwell, one whispered. I smiled. Let's get to work. And for the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest began to loosen. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. Drop a comment with the city you're tuning in from and your thoughts about the story. I'd love to see how far this story reaches, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories.